Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose, written by Abby Matthias. I am Abby Davis, and today I will be introducing Chapter 21. If you missed Chapter 20, you can go back with the link in the description or using the playlist, either or. And if you are all caught up and ready to go, we will continue with Chapter 21, A Day to Remember.
After that night, I spent another month observing and trying to control my emotional growth. When it came to extreme situations, I had no control whatsoever. The only reason why I knew that was because of a work incident Abby had with a cow. One of the majestic beasts that she loved had charged her for no reason, as she was moving the cows forward towards the parlor. As Abby ran, I found myself grabbing the cow's neck and choking it with my muscular form. I did learn, though, that with the new muscles, I turned out stronger than before. The poor cow was gasping for air because of how hard I was strangling it. However, I let go of the animal entirely once I knew Abby had crossed over to the other side of the barn where she was safe. She stared at me petrified when it happened, and I apologized for the abrupt change. Despite my sympathy, she ran to her father in tears and told him about the attack. He instantly took action and they shipped the cow to the butching block. Apparently, once a cow charges at you, you never know if or when they are going to charge you again. So the rest of the day was full of resting and silence. Besides the point, when it came to the anger part of the growth, it was easier to constrain. I became familiar with the starting point of the expansion and would immediately defer myself to a more calming state of mind. In the cases where I did feel it, I would just take some deep breaths and think of other subjects to tame myself. So the only true time I had to completely control it was whenever I was around Satan or other demons. I didn't want to be a target for anyone, especially if it meant they would target Abby. So I kept everything to myself and held everything back as best I could. When it came to my protector child, she was still continuing to do her own thing while trying to get more comfortable with me. Once in a while, we would switch with each other and I would film lip sync videos for her again while she gave me advice on my performance. She kept telling me that it was a good way to get the basics of acting down so I could better act like her if I needed to. When it came to her requests, I normally complied with her and did as I was told or asked. There were times I would tell her no and she accepted my decision, but she was understanding in those circumstances. She was starting to respect and trust some of my decision making skills. Of course, it wasn't perfect all the time, but progress was still being made, which made me happy. Anyhow, it was now June 25th of 2021 and approximately 12:30 p.m. 3 days over the 2-month mark since I have been paired with her. She was starting to get ready for something, but I didn't know exactly what for. She changed her clothes in her bedroom while I stayed in the cosplay room waiting for her to come back. Once she did, I noticed she wore an emerald green flowy short sleeve shirt with blue jeans. She had her hair half up to keep herself at a cool temperature while still having half of it down. To be honest, this was the nicest I've ever seen Abby, and it was pleasant. Emerald really was a unique color, and it looked good on her. She finally looked professional out of all the time I've spent with her. I was so appreciative of her outfit that I had to comment upon it. Wow, you look very professional, I said with a swing. She gave me a slight smile and replied with,
Why, thank you. As you can tell, I don't dress like this that much.
Yeah, I can see that. But if you don't mind me asking, why do you look so nice? What's the occasion?
Wait, you forgot?
She said, glaring at me surprised. I froze in place as I became slightly worried. Apparently, I forgot about something important and kept trying to recall what it was. There has been a lot of things on my mind lately that I couldn't remember what she had planned for this month. So, as I failed to recognize the important day, I continued to stare at her blankly as she answered my question.
We have a date with Damien.
What do you mean, we? This was your thing, not mine.
Darius, you have to shapeshift and become Darla. He wanted to hang out with all of us, including Scarlet.
My eyes widened as I finally started recalling the phone call that she had last month with Damien on that unforgivable day of chaos. My spine started to shiver from the recognition of that day, and it shook my body back to reality. Upon that, I instantly questioned the idea. Wait, you actually want me to do that? Are you crazy?
Yes, I do. If I know that you can shapeshift, I am not going to openly lie to my friends about Darla. I already said she would be there, Darius. She said with air quotes. I stood there in silence as she continued trying to persuade me. You know how you said you don't like lying, and I agreed with you? That is exactly how I feel right now. I can't lie to them anymore.
But yet you are still lying to them because of Darla. She isn't real. You are just going to dig yourself a deeper hole if you keep lying.
But don't you see my point? If you don't show up as her, questions are going to be asked, and I am going to have to lie to them even more than if you would just use your power to become her.
I glanced into Abby's eyes as she cornered me into becoming a female again. Yet she knew how to win checkmate and started to plea.
Darius, please. I've never asked you to use your powers, and I'm asking you kindly to just pretend for today. Can you please do this for me?
As I kept staring into her eyes, I could sense her inner child and visually saw her begging. She displayed a kind of face that a young child would use to get what they wanted. And even though this was a fresh 20-year-old girl, it was still having some sort of effect on me somehow. I almost felt sympathetic and felt the urge to do as she asked. So defeatedly, I responded to her plea. Okay, fine. I'll do it. Give me some room, please. And with that, she backed herself up to the door. I haven't practiced the power since I first changed into my female self, but I figured it wouldn't be that hard to do it again. If I could do it accidentally, I could manage to do it on purpose. So after prepping and grasping the idea of becoming female, I waved my hands like I did that night and managed to activate the transforming smoke. Starting from my feet, I let it up to the top of my head to fully submerge my body within it. Then once everything changed, the smoke dispersed to reveal the female character of Darla. I turned my head slightly to face Abby once more and saw her with a questionable expression on her face. What? I asked.
We are going to have to get you different clothes.
Why? I am just fine in my clothes, I exclaimed, raising my arm up.
Darius, look at your outfit. They are hanging off your limbs and look baggy. Do you really want to be drenched in your clothes and drag them all over Timbuktu?
Glancing at my arm, I saw she had a good point. The clothes were not really suitable for the day and didn't wrap me like they used to. I would really have to roll up the sleeves and pant legs in order to function properly. But was I really about to just go out and get clothes for being a woman? I didn't even know where the first place to start was. So after a minute, I decided to tell her how I felt. Okay, I get it, Abby. However, I don't know if I'm gonna feel comfortable in any of the clothes you pick out for me. After my response, she looked at me with surprise and disgust while she vocalized herself.
Dude, I am not picking out any of your clothes. You can make your own decisions on what you want to wear. I am just there to semi-help you with what you need and to pay because obviously you don't have any human money to spend on yourself.
Which that alone is a good reason why I don't want you getting me clothing. I don't want you paying for things that you're not going to use. She then took in a deep breath and closed her eyes to ensure she kept her frustration to herself. But after a few seconds, she opened her eyelids again and spoke a final time.
Darius, I am getting you new clothing for this form, and that's final. That way you don't have to worry about you feeling uncomfortable with yourself while we are at lunch and you look presentable. Plus, it's the least I can do for you after saving me from that cow a week ago. Now let's go.
She ordered, pointing at the door. At that remark, I accepted her demand as I knew I wasn't going to win this argument, and followed her to the car. As we started heading to the city again, I found myself looking outside the window, taking in the countryside fields and beauty before we slammed into the packed city once more. The environment did change drastically as we made our way to the town, but anyhow, I recognized our pathway a little as we passed the Golden Rose, but grew confused as to exactly where we were going. So as I sat clueless in the passenger seat, she drove to some sort of clothing store called Beloved 20s. As we got out of the car, my eyes fell upon the big sign as the words were outlined in dark pink and filled in with red. But what made this sign unique to its brand was a pair of ladies' lips were used as the 0 and 20. From just analyzing its logo, the business sounded like a popular girls' store where it was nothing but short shorts and V-necks. So I quickly voiced my opinion before it was too late. Hey Abby, are you sure this is the right place to shop? The point of this is to make me look formal and not show a lot of skin, if you get what I mean. I said, closing the passenger side car door.
Yes, I know. I promise it isn't what you think. I get my clothes here too, and you see how I look.
She then made her way to the back of her car where we met and comforted me some more.
I wouldn't make you wear clothes that make you uncomfortable.
And with that in mind, she led me into the store to start our search. As Abby maneuvered within the building, I kept glancing around to see the new fashion trends in this day and age I was in. It was nothing but see-through shirts and short shorts that practically could act like thongs. However, as we traveled deeper into the establishment, I could see the shift in fashion as longer shorts and normal shirts were found. Once we got to a designated area, Abby turned to me and started explaining things.
Okay, so this is the more formal section of the store. I figured we could start here to get you some attire that would satisfy your formal look. However, I would like you to get some casual clothes as well. Not everything is about dressing to impress. We'll also need to get you some bras and...
Bras?
I shouted, also noticing my female vocals sounding along with my original voice. As I stared at her, confused as hell, she shushed me and told me to quiet down. After her demand, she grabbed my arm and made eye contact to elaborate.
Yes, bras. Because right now your girls are just loosely hanging off your chest. I am not saying a push-up bra, but at least a sports bra will help steady them and also save you from showing any nipple action that might occur.
At first I grew confused on what she meant by that. But then I remembered the way Satan looked with his super tight shirt that exposed everything on him, and got what she meant. Upon that brief reflection, I shifted my arms to have them cross in front of my chest as I started feeling insecure about myself. She smiled a little upon my reaction and walks me over to the first rack.
Go on and choose whatever you want. Based on your size, I'm going to say try searching for the large sizes of shirts and pants. But otherwise, we will figure out your shoes and bras in a little bit. I don't know about the situation with your underwear, so you'll have to let me know later on, I guess. But otherwise, go ahead and start looking,
She instructed. And with that command, I followed through and searched the rack of clothing. As I sifted through, I saw shirts that I could live with and shirts that I despised. Regardless, though, I attempted to find more of the silk-made fabrics that were affordable, that somewhat matched my current shirt. I liked the softer materials rather than the cotton fabrics. It was gentle on my skin and breathable to wear. So after about 10 minutes of looking, I ended up finding a red long sleeve with black texturing of lines. Obviously more in a woman's formal shirt, but it at least covered the important parts of my torso. Another shirt I found within that time span was a red and purple shirt with textured swirls instead of lines. I didn't have a whole lot of choices, and I wanted to stick with the red theme I was used to. So ultimately, those were the closest ones. Along with those shirts, I also got black formal pants to match everything, of course. As for casual clothes, I just picked out 3 red shirts and black sweatpants to make Abby happy. Once I picked out those clothes, she told me that I needed to try them on before she bought them to make sure they were the correct sizes. I could understand the logic behind that because neither of us had a clue on what size I was and only guesstimated. Not only did I have to try those on, but she wanted me to try on the bras as well. At the thought of that, I felt my face getting warm and I knew I was starting to blush in embarrassment again. I have never felt so uncomfortable in my life, and it was all because of being a girl. I had a 20-year-old female trying to help me find bras for boobs I shouldn't even have. None of this was comforting to say the least. But once she coordinated with me on picking out a couple bras I was okay with, she shoved everything in one dressing room along with myself and left me be. Obviously, at this point, I was scared to undress and see my full body. However, I knew it was gonna feel good to get out of the baggy clothes and look professional again as I liked to be. So with a deep breath of courage, I stripped down to find my boxers had manipulated themselves to me in order to fit while my chest was exposed. So knowing that information, I started to put on the pants and bras to ensure they were the correct sizes. As I was clasping one of the bras that Abby picked out, I started having flashbacks from my past life. All the times I made it to the bedroom with my wife. All the instances of kissing and undoing the bra to unleash the lumps of flesh. I recalled how smooth I would be to remove her clothing and make those moments memorable for both of us. All the wonderful times of being alive and young with my spontaneous spouse. However, those memories flew by fast as I came back to the realization that I was now a woman and it wasn't the time to think about that. After that little episode, I tried the rest of the clothing on and found all of it was appropriate and to my liking. So I finished up and dressed myself in my original clothes again to finish the rest of the shopping. As I exited the fitting room, Abby asked if I needed to check the women's underwear and confirmed that I was all good in that department. To be honest, her face displayed a funny expression when I told her that. It was almost like she was given immense relief knowing she didn't have to help me with that part of my wardrobe. But I was just as relieved as she was for that. It was already bad enough with the bras. I didn't need to talk more about my unwanted body and curves. Anyhow, We managed to travel to the shoe department and found a foot measuring tool to indicate my foot size being a size 9. As we came to that conclusion, I searched the aisles and found a regular pair of black sneakers and a formal pair of flats to match each one of my outfits. That way, Abby couldn't yell at me for grabbing only one pair of shoes, and I had 2 different pairs to choose from. As I completed my search, we both became satisfied and decided to check out so I could quickly change before the meetup. Once we exited the store and stood outside the car, I decided to show my appreciation of what Abby did by saying, "Thank you, Abby, for the clothes. You most certainly didn't have to." She then wiped her hand in the air in response and smiled as she responded with,
No problem. And of course I did. I wasn't gonna make you walk around in those baggy clothes. Especially if people can see you now. Now we need to get to the Golden Rose. Our reservation is at 2. Quickly change into one of your outfits and we can go.
and with that, I quickly levitated an old blanket she had in her car to give me some privacy to change. After about 3 minutes, I folded the blanket back up to reveal my red and purple formal shirt with black pants and flats. Abby complimented the look briefly, but was starting to get in a rush, so I scurried myself into the passenger seat, and she drove us to the restaurant again. At this point in time, the newly paved parking lot for the establishment was finished, so we were able to park much closer than the first time around. I didn't have to deal with any more disgusting men along the street or worry so much about sexual violence, which was quite a relief. But even better was that we had front row parking to the restaurant. All we had to do was walk a few steps and enter the building, and that is exactly what we did. Once we entered and stopped in the hostess area for a moment, we spotted Damien waving us down from a booth and made our way to him. He stood up and greeted us both with an embrace. The hug for me was short, sweet, and unexpected. However, the hug for Abby was much longer and seemed more affectionate. They stayed within that embrace of state for about 15 seconds and eventually resorted back to their resting body positions. Once the affectionate greeting was over, Abby and I scooted into one side of the booth while Damien occupied the other side by sitting in the middle.
Is Scarlet coming?
Abby asked towards Damien.
Unfortunately, no. She texted me a few minutes ago saying she couldn't make it. Her boyfriend surprised her with a secret vacation to Italy, so she's not in the country. But hey, that means we get a hangout day to ourselves finally.
Figures.
I said, forgetting that he could hear me. Upon my mistake, I quickly apologized for my outburst and told them I had no right to say that. However, instead of being mad, they both laughed at my reply.
You don't need to be sorry, Darla. Abby and I know how she is. Seems like you picked up on the way she is too pretty quickly.
Well, yeah. She isn't very hard to read compared to most people.
I stated. He smiled upon my remark and moved the conversation along to talk to Abby about his summer so far. As I watched the interaction between the both of them, I could see the special connection that they had formed. Anyone could clearly see that they had chemistry. Abby looked cheerful as ever while he practically had googly eyes. But another thing I noticed about his eyes was that they were pretty dilated, which was one of the biggest giveaways of him liking her. It was one of the clearest signs of someone having strong feelings towards a person they were interacting with. Yet I don't think Abby clearly knew that. Besides that observation, I also noticed how they took turns listening to each other and showed all the signs of enjoying one another's company. It was an incredible sight to see, but of course I got pulled in once in a while to talk. Damien would bring me into certain conversations and I would do my best to answer honestly. Obviously, there were certain questions that he asked that I couldn't quite answer truthfully, like, what do you do for a living? Or, how did you and Abby become friends? Yet I have managed to stay somewhat truthful to my past. The first answer I replied saying I used to work as a traveling nurse with my mom, but because we moved, I didn't quite have a job yet, nor did I need one because of my dad's income. The second response was that I was touring her college before I applied to it, and met her in the hallway coincidentally. Otherwise, the rest of his questions I answered with no problem. There was one conversation, though, that I truly made myself a part of, and it all started when Damien asked about her ex-boyfriend.
So, how is your relationship with Chad going?
Upon him asking, I could sense the negative tone he used indicating his disliking of Chad and of the romantic relationship. Without saying a word, I turned my head to Abby as her expression changed drastically. She reacted poorly and tilted her head downward as she closed her eyes. Damien caught her reaction and instantly started fishing for answers.
Abby, what happened? Did that bastard hurt you? Did you two break up?
He only hurt me a little, and sadly, yes, we did.
She said hesitantly. Now with that response, I knew that was my cue to step in.
Abby, from what you told me, that is an understatement. I wouldn't call being grabbed by your chin so hard that it bruises a little.
Once that was out in the open, she quickly turned to me with wide eyes in reaction to my statement. Yet she couldn't say anything before Damien became somewhat mad and started talking.
You don't need to tell me everything right now, but I would like to know someday when you're ready. From the sound of it, I won't be very pleased. However, I would like to know when this happened.
Abby nodded and obliged to his request, stating the event took place about 2 months ago. She also willingly said the bruise on her face was the reason she secluded herself before she had the last meetup. After she replied, I could see her starting to tear up and sniffle as those memories started flowing back into her head. However, Damien grabbed her hand and pulled her out of that existence.
Hey, there is nothing to worry about anymore. I am so glad you are out of that relationship. It was extremely toxic and abusive. I am so happy to hear that it ended. Now I don't have to worry about getting a phone call or hearing you were severely hurt by the hands of him. You are such a strong woman, Abby. I am always here for you and will support you through everything that happens within your life. You are amazing in every way, and don't let anyone else tell you different.
I couldn't agree more with what Damien ranted about. I nodded profusely at the end of his rant, showing how I felt the same, and Abby smiled at both of us, especially to Damien.
Thank you, Damien. That means a lot. I am so glad to have a friend like you.
Once she said that, they willingly moved the conversation onto a different topic that didn't really involve me. As lunch went on, I couldn't help but analyze the physical characteristics of Damien. Like I said earlier, he had silverish hair that shimmered in the lights as if the highlights of his hair were metallic-like. He had quite a strong jawline and a broad physique as he wore his same blue button-down shirt that he wore during the last meetup. His face was clean with absolutely no facial hair to be seen, so his dimples showed within his smile and laugh. However, what caught my attention again was his piercing blue eyes. As I stared at them, my body kept sending me waves of deja vu for some reason. I knew I've seen his eyes before as we met last time, but I felt like I've seen those eyes somewhere else. The only problem with that was I couldn't pinpoint where. So it kept nagging at me the entire time we were at lunch. All of us pretty much ordered the same food we did last time, and let me tell you that it was still amazing to eat normal human food. I devoured my steak again like last time, except I ate a little slower this time around. I still ended up being the first one done with my plate, but it wasn't for a long period of time. I actually savored all the flavors and ingredients instead of huffing it down. But besides the point, once lunch was all done, it was time for the bill like usual. As our waitress brought it, Abby and Damien playfully fought over who would pay for the meal.
Damien, I got it. You paid last time for lunch.
I actually didn't pay. Scarlett said she was gonna because she felt entitled to, so she paid last time. Please allow me to be the gentleman and pay this time.
Then, as quick as a flash, Abby quickly snatched the bill from the table and placed her card on it as the waitress came back to check on us. Once she grabbed the card and walked away with Abby's payment, Damien smiled and shook his head at her.
I say, Miss Abby, you are a smart one. How about we settle this like true adults? All of us in a bowling match. My treat. That way we are both even on paying and the fun doesn't have to end quite yet.
My eyes widened at the thought of going bowling. Not that I didn't like it. It was actually one of my favorite hobbies before everything happened. However, I didn't know how Abby felt about going. So I turned my head to her as she glared at me for my reaction.
If you want to go bowling, I'm up for it. The decision is yours, Abby. You are my ride after all.
I said teasingly. As I said that, Abby's mouth smiled widely, and she turned her head back to Damien to reply.
All right. You got yourself a deal, sir.
And she gave out the most girly laugh I had ever heard from her. He chuckled and smiled in response, and I officially knew they were meant for each other. Unfortunately, though, I don't think she was going to admit it. Once the bill was paid, we all made our way to the Mega Pin bowling alley about 5 minutes away from the Golden Rose. As agreed upon, Damien was able to pay for all three of us to bowl, and more fun was created. As the activity went on, though, I was just amazed at the kind of relationship Abby had with her friend. You could tell that they were extremely close, but yet they did things normal friends don't willingly do. They would tease each other with more personal comments and present subtle actions towards each other. For example, Damien would come up behind Abby to help her with her posture and technique when bowling. Then while playing the arcade games, they would give each other prizes. They laughed like crazy and opened up more about personal subjects that wouldn't be brought up with Scarlett or their other friends. The pair were more touchy and affectionate with each other with less people around. There were times where they apologized for their behaviors because of the fear of me being third wheel. Of course, I said they were fine and allowed them to be young. They still involved me in conversations, so I really didn't have any complaints. I was letting them have their fun as it was much needed. I was just trying to soak in the moment of Abby genuinely having fun before we had to leave. And as quick as lightning, time passed and our bowling session was over. It was 6:45 p.m. and we were all just about ready to go home. Damien walked us to Abby's car and decided to break the lovey-dovey feeling by asking,
I know it's a rough subject, but I would like to know what happened with Chad. I'm glad you're out of that relationship and out of his life, but I want to know.
Her face turned surprised and sad all at the same time because of the topic. I knew she didn't want to talk about it, but I could tell she was going to explain it to him anyway. If it were me personally, I would too. He's proven himself to be a worthy friend. I would trust him more than Scarlett with that kind of information. So after she paused and took a deep breath, she started to speak.
Well, he made verbal comments like usual and...
No, Abby.
he interrupted.
I'm sorry if I sound rude, but what made you come to your senses and leave him? He did that to you for years now.
Abby brought her head down and closed her eyes in sadness. She was conflicted, and I could see it. I knew this was tough for her to recall and think about again. So I started to step closer to her side, thinking she would want my support. However, she eventually got up the courage to speak again.
He started saying more aggressive comments than normal and being impatient. The day I broke up with him, he yelled at me for not cleaning his trailer and demanded me to make him a sandwich. As I was making it, I started reflecting on everything and how miserable I was with him in my life. So I guess a voice of reason vocalized in my head and told me I needed to leave. Then from there it got worse.
How much worse? And please don't sugarcoat it. Darla already said there were bruises.
Damien asked, stepping closer to her. Abby took in another deep breath and stared into Damien's eyes for comfort. She was also searching for the strength to tell him, while also finding the words to best describe the situation. After taking a moment for herself, she told him to his face.
He ended up slapping me in the face and called me a bitch because of him cutting his arm with a knife. I also didn't face him after that, and he grabbed my chin to force me to turn. Hence the bruising Darla talked about.
I looked instantly at Damien to see his face full of anger and sorrow. He didn't like the truth she had to say, but he still stayed silent, so Abby could continue.
He wouldn't lighten his grip, so it left a really bad bruise after that. And it was the reason why I didn't meet up with anyone but Darla after what happened. She was the only person besides my parents and Chad that knew about it. I wasn't myself for the longest time, and when it comes to him, I don't know if I will ever be. But I guess it feels a little better to tell someone else about it rather than holding it in.
Oh, Abby, I'm always here for you. I can't even fathom the amount of pain you have been through. You must have been mortified. I'm so sorry I wasn't there.
And why is that? So that you could attempt to steal my girl and get your ass beat?
A random voice called from a distance. We all turned to the noise coming from the megapin and saw trouble was about to start. For out in the open was Chad, exiting the bowling alley and walking towards us. Damien instantly reacted and moved himself to Chad as he was full of fury.
Not for that reason. I wish I could have saved her from the amount of pain you brought to her, you piece of shit.
Chad kept walking closer and tried maneuvering around Damien to, I assume, get to Abby. However, Damien shuffled in front of him and put out his hand.
If you think that I would let you go anywhere near her after what you did, you're out of your mind. Plus, your previous statement is false. She isn't your girl anymore.
This isn't between you and I. At least not yet. I want another word with Abby whether she likes it or not.
Upon that threat, I glanced at Abby to see how mortified and scared she grew within a span of a few seconds. After viewing such a negative reaction from her, the theoretical protective switch within me flipped, and I acted upon it. I instantly stepped myself in front of Abby to keep her blocked from everything if Chad got past Damien for some reason. As the two kept bickering back and forth with rage, I started to analyze my protector child by listening to her breathing. It was of course rapid and shallow, but I wanted to take note of how fast it was. I knew she was scared out of her mind. Her ex was implying threats and acting as if they never broke up. But I did not want her to hyperventilate until she fainted. So trying to reassure her, I spoke within her head. I will not let anything happen to you. And from the looks of it, Damien is just as determined as I am to keep you safe. You will never be with that boy again as long as I am here. Just try to steady your breathing. I don't want you to pass out. Once I was done talking in her head, I glanced over my shoulder to see Abby slightly nodding and trying hard to do as I instructed. Knowing she was doing her best, I refocused back on the conversation between the man and the foolish boy.
She won't talk to you ever again after what you did, and I sure as hell won't let you either.
Damien yelled in Chad's face. As much as he shouted, it didn't affect the predator, who was just as mad as his opponent.
If my toxicity didn't bother you back then to keep us apart, why would it now?
It did bother him. He just had the politeness and kindness to not interfere with Abby's life, unlike you.
I intruded. Catching them off guard with my words, I saw Chad gaze at me with wide eyes as his expression changed to flabbergasted.
No. You didn't tell me you had a friend that was way hotter than you, Abby. It doesn't take a brainiac to see a smoking hot girl standing in front of them.
At that statement, I grew furious with disgust. Yet before I could say anything, Damien did.
Yeah, Chad. There are 2 hot girls, not just one. Guess you just proved yourself to be a dick, and now you won't have a chance with her, either.
Damien then pushed Chad back to put him in his place and created more space between them. Abby gasped at the action as we both knew what was about to happen. With that very action, Chad grew enraged and finally came unglued with words.
It's already bad enough your little whore of a friend showed me up in my own home and wasted my food. However, you have no right to pick a fight that doesn't even involve you. Despite the fact I also know she cheated on me with you. So how about I repay you back for that?
And he quickly swung a fist at Damien. Fortunately, though, Damien saw it coming, dodged it, and kicked Chad further away from him.
Listen, you selfish prick. Abby never cheated on you, especially not with me. I wouldn't dream of cheating on someone with another person or be the other man in a relationship. Also, this involved me since day one. I've seen the pain you put this girl through for months now. I've seen the light practically drain from her eyes and watched her happiness wither away each day I saw her. But I don't have to see it anymore. Now that it's over between you two, I will stay by her side and defend her from your stupidity and arrogance.
As those words flew out of his mouth, I agreed with everything he had to say. However, with every true statement, I felt myself growing angrier. This boy has put her through torment for months on end. Even though I wasn't around for all of them, I knew Chad had been so cruel to her. He definitely needed someone to put him in his place. As I was reflecting on how much I wanted to attack him, I was dragged out of my thoughts when Abby started talking within my head.
Darius, your muscle growth is acting up in this form.
My face expression altered as I turned my head to view my arm. I saw she had a hold of it and tightened her grip to show the arm growing muscular slowly. Upon that realization, I started to grow worried and nervous about my current future. If this kept up, I would burst through this shirt and expose myself again. Hell, I might even break through the pants. My body started to breathe heavily, trying to think of what to do. However, Abby spoke again, refreshing my memory.
You can't panic, Darius. You need to control your emotions. I know you're angry, but you need to think about something else to distract your mind. Think of Nala.
After Abby said that, my mind instinctively flashed back to a dinner date that I went on with my wife. We were going out to a fancy restaurant for our anniversary. However, as we were on our way there, she told me to drive us to the bowling alley instead so we could actually have a good time rather than surrounding ourselves with hypocrites and bratty rich folks. Shocked by her request, I still drove us there, and we ended up bowling in formal clothes for many hours. Our dinner date consisted of bowling alley food and drinks instead of expensive small portion meals. But despite that fact, the memory that was playing in my head was a very special one. The reason it was so special was because Nala managed to get the cook on board to help her announce something to me secretly. Now, the pizzas at these bowling alleys were absolutely humongous, so you could write small messages using the toppings if you really wanted to. And she did just that. Once our pizza came out, she came to my side and wanted to see my reaction. For as I took in the sight of the pizza, I read 2 words in pepperoni lettering saying, "Baby Stone." It took me by surprise and I needed a minute to figure out what it meant. But after a few seconds of thought, I realized that she was announcing she was pregnant. I could remember the amount of joy I had from hearing that news. I actually started tearing up with the amount of joy I was feeling. I hugged and kissed her like there was no tomorrow, and we rejoiced for the rest of the night. Although that was a fantastic memory, I was pulled away from it when I heard a grunt and a punch. Regaining my focus again, I saw Chad holding his face while Damien's hand was still formed into a fist.
Now do you get the hint? You try that again and I will punch your lights out. Get out of here, douchebag.
Damien exclaimed, pointing away from us. As he continued to stand broad and pissed, Chad walked away, mumbling under his breath. Damien ensured Chad left before he turned back around to witness a frightened Abby and a confused and surprised Darla. He walked steadily towards us with a face of fury, but as he got closer, his expression changed to worried.
Are you two okay?
He asked, standing in front of us. I stayed frozen in shock from what just happened. However, Abby started tapping my shoulder to ensure everything was okay again. Once she did so, I brought my guard down and allowed her to walk up to Damien. Upon doing so, Abby grabbed his hand and checked it for injuries.
We are fine. What about you? You punched him.
Yes, I did. I've been wanting to do that for a while now, and I never thought I would be able to. However, the situation called for it.
Abby then displayed a shameful look and started bowing her head to the ground. However, Damien blocked the motion with his fingers and tenderly raised her head to him.
Don't listen to a damn thing he said. We all know the truth.
After that, he embraced her in his arms and continued to calm her nerves. His eyes closed while his chin laid on the top of her head, and I couldn't help but stare at him. I could see how much he cared just by the way he was presenting himself. As I observed the scene, I felt a huge wave of deja vu again, but I obviously wasn't going to say anything. I have felt this emotion one too many times to falsely say if it was correct or not. So I brushed the feeling away once more as they broke the embrace. Damien faced me again with Abby along his side and asked,
Do you think you can drive her home? She seems pretty worked up.
Yes, Damien, of course.
I said, agreeing. He then wrapped her in one more hug to ensure her safety and wished each other well before he started walking to his car. As he made his way, I heard one of Abby's thoughts voice itself in my head.
I wish I had the strength to tell Damien how I feel. He's the kind of guy I always want in my life.
With that confession alone, my suspicions were proven to be true. Abby did like Damien, but hasn't told him. For some reason, she had a barrier that was preventing her from confessing it to him. Soon enough, though, I was going to figure out why. Once we heard the car engine start up, we waved goodbyes once more, and Abby gave me her keys to drive us back home. As I drove for the first time in forever, Abby gave me directions so I could successfully get us back home. I still knew how to drive and work a vehicle. I just need clarification on which way I was heading back to her house. But as we were about a block away from the house, we seen her parents' cars at the farm as the dogs were running about the yard. Knowing that, I was able to acknowledge that no one was at home, so Abby and I could talk freely about everything that happened. So once the car was parked and I gave Abby back her keys, I followed her into the cosplay room again. I grew confused because I figured she would have wanted to go into her room to sit, but for some reason, she walked into this room. So out of confusion, I asked, "Why are we in this room? Don't you want to lay down?"
No, I don't. Also, it's just force of habit now since you came along.
She said, leaning against her desk. As I seen the exhaustion display upon her face, I allowed her to take a few deep breaths before I started the conversation with her. "Are you okay?"
Do I look like I'm okay?
She said a little sarcastically. "You look like you're taking Chad's words to heart when you shouldn't be."
How can I not? Everything he said was right. I'm not the prettiest girl out of the bunch. I'm not slim and fit, and I have a missing fang tooth in my smile that makes me look stupid. I'm not.
I said back, stopping her from going any further with her depressive rant. "He's only saying that because he knows it gets under your skin. From what I'm hearing, he's using your insecurities against you to get inside your head."
But they're true flaws about me. Look at yourself.
She yelled, gesturing to me.
You look so beautiful in that form, and I have always wanted a body like that. I will never be able to obtain that for as long as I live.
"Abby, this isn't real." And I quickly changed myself back to my original demon form to prove a point. "That is just an illusion. Darla isn't a true human being. She is an illusion for a male demon to roam the earth. You can't compare yourself to that." After my declaration, I took in her expression as it started to concern me again. She looked as if she was in utter shock about something. Like she was glaring at something she wasn't supposed to be seeing. Searching for her focal point, her eyes fell upon. I looked down at myself to find that I was standing in front of Abby with only my underwear and collar on. The clothes I was wearing ripped when I changed back into myself. I suddenly saw the torn clothes on the ground and took in a sharp intake of breath, realizing I was almost fully exposed. "Oh, shit," I said aloud. I'm so sorry. I forgot that the clothes don't change with me. I'm such an idiot." At that moment, I wrapped my arms around my stomach to try and cover myself somewhat, regardless of how little the amount of coverage was. Yet Abby finally came to her senses and searched the shopping bags from earlier for my original clothes. She found them within a few seconds and handed them to me so I could get dressed. As I began to pull up my pants, she decided to break the silence.
You really don't like your gradient skin, do you?
Even though the question threw me off, I still answered her back. "No, Abby, I don't."
Is it one of your insecurities?
As much as I didn't want to reflect upon that, I didn't want to willingly admit that it was. She was absolutely right. It was actually the biggest insecurity I had. I have never seen anyone down in hell that had gradient skin. It was a quality that made me an outcast, and I didn't want anyone knowing about it. I didn't even want her to know. But here we are a second time standing face to face with the gradient in plain sight. To be quite honest, I wasn't comfortable talking about it either. So I figured I should briefly answer the question in order to move on. Yes, it is. It isn't just you who has insecurities. This happens to be an insecurity that I'm not comfortable talking about yet. So if you don't mind, I want to move on to a different subject. I said, finally buttoning my pants.
What else could you possibly want to talk about right now?
How about the relationship between you and Damien? I said, smirking a bit, knowing she was going to blush. After predicting her embarrassed reaction, she turned her head and said,
What about it? It's just a friendship.
No, it isn't, and you know it.
And what makes you say that? You're not his protector demon. You don't know how he feels about me.
That may be true initially. However, I was a doctor before all this, and he was showing physical signs indicating love. I answered, crossing my arms. The subtle actions he displayed proves it all. Him trying to help you bowl, winning you prizes at the arcade, his eyes being extremely dilated. All of them are signs of attraction. She turned her head back in complete shock and responded with,
What does dilated eyes have to do with anything?
If someone's eyes are dilated while they're talking to a person they like, that means the person has a huge amount of attraction towards the other. It's all about oxytocin and dopamine, the love hormones.
What? No, Damien's had that for a long time now. His eyes are always somewhat dilated when I hang out with him.
I stood there in such surprise as she continued to deny her feelings for him despite the facts. But the only thing is that she didn't know I had another fact up my sleeve. So if you don't think you like this man, then tell me why I heard a certain thought echoing in my head earlier. Specifically the one about wanting to tell Damien how you feel and how much you want a guy like him in your life. After that question, she stared at me bewildered and baffled on what to say. So I continued speaking to drive that stake in further. Oh yeah, I heard that little thought you had. Why are you trying to deny your feelings for him?
Because I don't. It's all a fluke.
She said, a little furious. At this point, all I wanted to do was show her the tunnel that was waiting for her. I began to think quickly on how to prove that those feelings were true and not just a false emotion. Yet eventually, I had a crazy idea pop into my head. I wasn't sure if it was going to work exactly the same as I wanted it to, but it was worth the shot in the dark. Close your eyes, I instructed.
What? Why would I do that? There's no need for it.
Just trust me, please. Close your eyes. After my gentle request, she threw her hands into the air in frustration and confusion. However, she eventually did as I asked, and I continued on. I want you to picture Damien standing in front of you with his silverish hair and broad figure. Picture every detail about him. As she was distracted by the description, I managed to use my shape-shifting powers in a different way by changing myself into him successfully without Abby noticing. Knowing that it worked to my benefit and pretending to act, I instructed her to open her eyes and face me. Once her eyes fully opened, she became flabbergasted once more upon the sight she took in. I tried expressing the same look Damien displayed throughout the day to resurrect her feelings from earlier. However, as I was acting, I realized another aspect of the scene that benefited my side of the debate. But yet it wasn't intentional. I forgot I still didn't put on my shirt and buttoned only my pants. From there, I knew this was going to be an interesting reaction. As she continued to stare at me, I decided to mimic his voice and repeat some of the remarks that he said today.
I say, Miss Abby, you are a smart one. You are beautiful in my eyes, and you shouldn't let anyone else dictate that.
I stepped closer to her as she stayed frozen, but still in awe. Next, I brought my hand to her cheek and started to rub it with my thumb to show more affection and comfort. Amazingly enough, she willingly leaned her head into it and actually grabbed at my hand to flatten it onto her face. Viewing her facial expression, I could see how much she was in contentment with only a simple gesture. She eventually gazed into my eyes, and I was able to take note of her dilated pupils. Knowing I finally had her attention, I gave her the shimmering smile that he had and just waited for one of her thoughts to pop into my head again. With only having to wait a few seconds, I finally heard the magical thought of lust sound in my head.
Call me your queen again, please. Just like what you did in the bubble.
I grew surprised as that specific thought voiced in my head. I wasn't expecting her to think about that bubble she gets sent to for some reason. Yet it was interesting as she never mentioned Damien was placed within that imaginary place. Nevertheless, my point was proven and I could slightly rub it in her face.
Told you, Abby.
I said, stepping back. Knowing I was right, I quickly changed myself back into my normal self and continued talking about my discoveries. You also failed to notify me of handsome Damien being within that bubble place you're sent to on occasion. She looked at me frustrated about the facts thrown in her face, but also expressed her feeling of defeat as she finally started to give in.
I figured it wasn't important.
Well, he must be very important to you if he's there. You get sent to that place of solitude because of your physical body being in distress or danger if we end up switching. It's supposed to be a safe space for you while I deal with your threat. He's probably there because of the amount of comfort he brings you. After that, Abby didn't say anything more. She looked so defeated by everything I was presenting and didn't try denying her feelings verbally anymore. So at that moment, I decided to try and neutralize her emotions before I sent her to bed. Abby, I'm sorry if I pushed your buttons or made you uncomfortable. I just wanted you to see that it's okay to have strong feelings for Damien. He is one of your closest friends, and I am sure he feels the same way about you. It is a natural thing to feel when you are attracted to someone. Don't let your insecurities deny you of happiness. I will stop pushing the subject and let you be now. After the little speech, she peered at me with tired eyes while displaying her relief in the conversation ending. Upon her reaction, I brought up my left arm and wiped the snake and rose marking to appear at Abby's health statistics. Her hunger and thirst levels were still fairly high, and her danger level wasn't even active. However, I seen her sleep level was getting pretty low and confirmed that she was tired.
What the hell is that?
Abby said, interrupting my thought process. I lifted my head to see that her eyes widened as the hologram projected from my arm. It's a tool to help me keep track of your health. I can see that you're really tired and I do not want to keep you up anymore. So I will make a deal with you. I said, cringing a little at the last sentence. I hated that line with a passion, but it just slipped out of my mouth. That phrase alone started bringing back memories of past deals I have made, and worry started to rise. But nevertheless, I knew this was something I could control, and there would be no negative consequences if she agreed to it. It was an unofficial deal that didn't have a catch. So after my brief cringe moment, I followed through and spoke again. If you go to bed right now and get some sleep, I will talk to you about this tool tomorrow. That way you can comprehend my words better and I don't have to explain things repeatedly. Immediately after, she nodded her head and agreed to the circumstances. So as she started walking towards the door, she spoke a final time to end the night.
Good night, Darius.
Good night, Abby. And she exited the room, shutting the door behind her. As my sight started clearing itself again, I saw I was in a doctor's office. I was standing next to my wife while our son sat on the examination table for his physical checkup. The pediatrician examining him was listening to his heart and checking his lungs for any faults or defects that could occur. The physical followed its standard procedure while the doctor didn't show any signs of worry or concern. Nala was hugging me tightly as we watched the doctor go through every step and consulted us about his vaccines being up to date. They even took him back to get an x-ray to ensure his bones were growing normally. Everything seemed fine and proceeded to present itself as a normal checkup. However, it wasn't until later when the doctor separated us from our son to talk. The feeling of worry grew in the pit of my stomach.
Now, everything that I seen and saw today was normal, except for one thing,
He said, with a concerned tone.
Okay. Well, what is it then?
Nala said with the same amount of concern. I continued to stare at the pediatrician and listened intently like any other concerned parent would at this point.
I am afraid that we found some sort of lump within his chest wall. It is about the size of a dollar coin at this point, and we compared our current x-rays to the ones from his last checkup, and this didn't appear. This is something that has evolved since his last physical.
So then what is your diagnosis on it? I said, making him get to the point.
Dr. Darius, this is hard for me to tell any parent, especially knowing that it is something happening to your child.
He said.
But I'm afraid that your son has rhabdomyosarcoma.
I widened my eyes in shock and disbelief. This couldn't be happening within my boy. He was healthy and playing like any other kid would at his age. There were no symptoms, no signs, no nothing. And now I had this doctor telling me that the worst disease on earth was growing inside of him. He was only 7 years old. But I knew his diagnosis was accurate, seeming how this disease did occur within children and young adolescents. I just couldn't bring my mind to terms with it.
Wait, what is that supposed to mean? How can you tell me that and not elaborate more on it? What exactly is that, Dr. Robinson?
Nala exclaimed, raising her voice. Dr. Robinson then raised his hand as if she was being rude and said,
I think it would be best if your husband told you rather than me.
At that remark, I turned my head to Dr. Robinson and stared at him furiously. He was seriously making me tell my own wife that our son had cancer. Our only child that we had that took us a year to conceive now had a rapid growing disease forming inside his chest. I wanted to scream right into his face and call him out. However, Nala grabbed my arm and made me turn towards her before I could say anything to him.
Darius, honey, what does that mean? It isn't anything too bad, right? Please tell me that it's just a minor issue that we can fix easily.
She said, choking over her words. I couldn't help but gaze into her eyes as I saw the tears starting to form. I was forced into the most awful situation in my life. I had to break my wife's heart because our son's pediatrician wasn't man enough to explain anything to sorrowful parents. After I gathered my words, I took in a shaky deep breath and regrettably started to speak. It means that Damien has cancer now. It's a rapid growing disease that is most commonly found in young children. There isn't a clear way yet on how to treat it. She then brought her hand to her mouth, taking in the information I told her. Her head instantly started shaking in disbelief as the panic started to sink in.
No, not our boy! He couldn't possibly have it. Darius, please tell me this is true.
As I saw my wife breaking down, I took her into my arms and allowed her to cry there. She clung to me tightly as sobs came from her weeping body. Everything from the news of my son's health to the reaction of Nala just broke me entirely. I lowered my head in silence and allowed my tears to flow silently as I tried to be her fortress. However, it only lasted for a moment before I was abruptly woken up and dropped out of thin air into Abby's computer chair. She was sitting up in her bed and breathing really hard as she was trying to take deep breaths. Her window curtains were closed, but the room was lit by a magenta color shining from the LED light strips. Based on my observations, I could tell it was either late night or early morning as the darkness tried filling the room. Despite that information, I was more confused as to why I was teleported into her bedroom. This never happened before, and the only reason why it could have happened was because of her feeling threatened. So acting upon that, I quickly brought my arm up to check the danger level on the hologram. Her heart was racing, and the level was extremely high. As I found that out, the gears in my head were turning and thinking of possible reasons as to why she would have felt threatened at this time during her sleep. There seemed to be no intrusion, and there were no physical signs of struggle. So knowing that, it led me to one conclusion. Her dreams had welcomed her with a nightmare so terrible that it shook her to her very core.
This has been Chapter 21, A Day to Remember, from the book The Snake and the Rose. Tune in to the next video for Chapter 22. Thank you for listening.